Hello all, welcome to the Linux Rootkits for Red Blue Teams course on Pentester Academy. Now in this video, we'll continue with kernel module basics and look at how we can pass input parameters to a kernel module when we are insmodding it. So let's jump right in. Just tested before doing the video, so I know everything works. Okay. So now this is really the same Hello World module with only one change is that I'm going to be taking parameters as input. Now the way you can define these parameters is by first defining the variable where you want the parameter value to be passed. So I'm going to define two variables. One is an int, which is counter, and the other is a pointer to a character array or a string, right? So at the very top here, I have my definition for the counter, and I'm going to define it as static, so it's only visible in this file. So static int counter. And the way you basically identify that this is a module parameter is with the next line. So we call a macro called module underscore param, and we basically pass the name of the variable counter followed by the data type, which is going to be integer, and then followed by a permission set, which we'll look at in the next video. Now if you put in a 0 here, what that means is that there is no entry created in sysfs. If you put a permission value here, there will be an entry created in sysfs, and that file will have that permission. We'll talk about that in the next video. In this one, let's keep it 0, which means there is no sysfs entry. This is a module parameter which can accept input when the user is insmodding the module just during module initialization, right? Now after that, in order to describe this, in any help, which is if you do a mod info on the module, the macro to be used is module underscore param underscore desc for description, where we mention the name of the parameter, which is counter over here, followed by an actual string which gives us some idea about what the parameter is, right? Now if you were curious about module underscore param, we can look at that file by going to the Linux sources, and everything is available in the file linux module param.h. So we can do an include linux module param.h. There it is. So as you can see, this is actually a macro which in turn calls module param named, which in turn calls something. I mean, it's a huge chain. But the key thing for us really to note here is just this part, which is module underscore param takes in three values. The first, of course, is the variable to alter. This is, as we saw, was the counter, static int counter, variable name, followed by the type. Now the type can actually be any of these. So it can be a byte, a short, a ushort, int. It can be charp, which is a character pointer, bool, an inverse bool, etc. And then the last argument, which we'll look at in the next video, is perm, which stands for visibility permissions, as I mentioned in sysfs. So this is how we've defined counter. Now similarly, I have actually defined another input parameter, and this is a charp or a character pointer, and internally I call this message, define it as a static variable, and after that call module underscore param, pass message, mention it's a charp, and similarly in the description I mentioned that this is a message. So once we compile this, if I were to do a mod info hello world params.ko, what you would find is, apart from all the stuff we've seen so far, additionally, you'll actually find that we have two param fields here. The first one is counter, which kind of goes ahead and mentions what it is and the type. The second is message, again the message we have internally, followed by the type. Fantastic. So let's actually insert this module. Now before that, I'm going to clear dmessage. So I'm going to do a sudo dmessage-c. Oops. If I type in dmessage, there is nothing in here, which is great. Now let's actually insmod this module. Now if I do a dmessage, if you notice by default, the value seems to be 0, the message seems to be null, right? We can see that over here. If you were to open up the file, we'd actually find that these are the default values which are being given. Now, I'm going to actually do a remove mod. But this time around, when I do an ins mod, I'm going to pass values. I'm going to say counter equals 100 and message equals hello. Now if I type in dmessage, you'd actually find that the value is available now. It says counter is 100, the message is hello. Fantastic. If I were to do a rm mod again, now let's put in a longer message, hello world. Let's look at dmessage. Interestingly, the value of the counter is still passed, but unusually the message is only still hello, and we also get an extra issue which actually says unknown parameter world ignored. So why is this really happening? So what happens is that when you pass in the double quotes, the shell actually ends up looking at it and figures out what to do with it, and hence that's where this is actually stripped by the shell. So if you really wanted the whole string with the spaces and everything to be sent to our module, then we have to do it a little bit differently. So what we're going to do is make sure that we have an extra set of quotes in here of the other type. And then if we do a dmessage, there you go. You see that the entire hello world string was now passed. Fantastic. So why is module params important to us from a Linux rootkit perspective? Well, in the next couple of videos as we move along, what you'll find is that we will be looking at a lot of runtime information in the kernel. We may be hunting for a certain process ID, etc. And this is a very easy way by which we can actually pass this information to our module and look at all of that interesting data, right? So this is really still module basics, Linux kernel module basics 101. But it's important to go through this before we go to all the fun and juicy stuff. So just bear with me, maybe a couple of more videos, and then we will actually jump into interesting data structures, how to manipulate them, etc. Fantastic. So that's all for this video. Thank you.